of the show. I want to welcome you. We come to you live every Sunday evening at this time from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. on the West Coast and 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. on the East Coast. We like to think of ourselves as the show that is freeing America one enslaved mind at a time. And we do have a terrific show for you this evening. In the first 2 hours, we're going to be joined by Steve QUAYLE, and this is our precipitous good luck given what's going on across the planet and inside of our country. And in the final hour, we're splitting the hour up between Kathy Rubio, who's back with more revelations to go with what she revealed on this show last week. And Paul Martin is joining us in the last half hour on the run, hopefully cell phone connection cooperating. We are brought to you by Renaissance Precious Metals. And my feeling is you got a short time to act. You do have time to act. But if you leave your money in the bank, you're going to get destroyed. You're going to lose it. You're not going to have it. And people survive what's coming in crises, and they will survive better if they have something of value that they can barter, trade, use as collateral. And that's Renaissance Precious Metals, converting your soon-to-be worthless cash into precious metals. Give Steve QUAYLE a call tomorrow at 406-586-4842. That number again is 406-586-4842. 4842, and I want to remind everybody, God willing, and I'm sure this conference is still going to take place because I think it is in God's plan, the True Legends Conference in Branson, Missouri, September 14th through the 16th, and there's going to be a whole host of great guests there, Steve, Tim Alberino, on and on and on, and they're going to address the important topic, the final endgame of the globalists, transhumanism and the hybrid age, and the tickets are selling out rapidly. There's little time to act. I'd recommend you go now. Steve has a banner ad on his website at stevequayle.com. I have one on mine at thecommonsenseshow.com. You can click on either one and you'll end up in the same place. And things are tough. I just want to put one more thing out there. If we go to war, and we go to war in a month, in 3 months, next week, one of the first casualties is the food supply. And I was selling food in high volume amounts 6 months to 2 years, and people were saying, Dave, I see the need for it. I get it. But I can't afford that much at one time. So what we did here at the Common Sense Show is we took 4 weeks of survival food, 25 years shelf life, great restaurant quality, and we have now reduced that price from $250 for the 4-week supply to $99. I don't want to have anybody have any excuse for not being able to survive the first initial rush of food shortage due to warfare or what other calamity. How do you get there to order yours? Go to preparewithdave.com. That's preparewithdave.com. No promo code needed. This is something that we're bringing to you from the Common Sense Show because we don't want to see any of our audience get caught short. Please take the steps necessary to protect your family. Well, on our newsmaker line with me, we have Steve QUAYLE. And Steve, I've probably had about 2 hours sleep in the last 34 hours. My head's spinning with all that's going on. I can't keep up with the flow of information. How are you doing, my friend, and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Dave, and this is a very perilous and dangerous time beyond what we've even warned about all these years because the motion for the New World Order is in place. And I want to remind everybody that Paul Warburg, the infamous banking, if you will, man who controlled a quarter of the world's wealth in the 1950s, made the statement, by consent or by conquest, there will be a new world order. Brent Scowcroft, the national security advisor, under one of the presidents, basically echoed that, and everybody echoes that same statement. And then we've got the entire history, if you will, of the world bankers. So when Jesus said the love of money is the root of all evil, he's not saying money is, he's saying the love of it. And, Dave, talking to some really wealthy people years and years ago that were all so ego-driven and so literally a couple of them possessed by hell, it was all about the control over people's lives. Now, in light of the Deagle report, I want to commend you for writing the article you wrote on just how Russia has prepared for war. And we know from the Bible that the kings of the East are even going to withstand the kingdom of the Antichrist. Obviously, Russia and China know what's going on. And, it's interesting, isn't it? If you even tell the truth now on Syria, you're considered a Russian spy, a Russian troll, a Russian mouthpiece. And then, obviously, DHS even put up the request for software now to monitor any statements about them, to follow everybody who makes a statement about them. So what we're living in is what I would say a utopian hellhole nightmare dream that is upon us, and people still don't understand the degree of control and manipulation that we're exposed to every day. So I would say this, most Americans better figure something out, and I think you and I need to hit this and hit it hard tonight. American defense posture does not even postulate for the survival of the civilian population, whereas Russia months ago, 6 to 8 months ago, ran an exercise where they moved 40 million people into their fallout shelters and bunkers. We've seen this week even Russia Today and other Russian publications and newscasts telling people what to bring to the bomb shelter. Yes. Do you believe, Dave, that anybody in the United States even knows, number one, the lateness of the hour, number two, that the United States government has no civilian defense any longer? Do you think they even know? And then the next question is, do they care?
Well, I think it's part of the plan. I think the globalist infiltration of our executive branch has led them to deliberately forsake civil defense drills. We used to do them when I was in grade school, and they don't do them now because depopulation is on the agenda for the United States people.
Well, and that's what I think people have got to understand. You see, everybody's into video games, but imagine everything that's been shot at in video games is the American public, and then they'll get the figure. Because even Kissinger and others, when he said this, okay, the New World Order this Henry Kissinger in 1994, the New World Order cannot happen without U.S. participation, as we are the most significant single component. And I would say, duh. Yes, there will be a New World Order, and will force the United States to change its perceptions. Now, in that statement, to change its perceptions, I'll give you the bottom line interpretation of that. We will brainwash you and divorce you from all historic reality and embrace the globalists, and we will merge communism. We'll merge every world system to bring it about until it's under control of the international bankers. Now, again, bankers are, what would you say, the facilitating force of the New World Order. That's what they buy people with. That's what they hire people to be killed with. They use their money to do that. And look at the change. And let's talk about the transformation of Donald Trump. It shouldn't be lost on anybody that immediately after, his attorney Cohen had his office raided, and that just violated everything that had been, if you will, due process under the law. Even guys like Alan Dershowitz and very liberal attorneys are saying this is the end of constitutional law. Notice the change from a couple days saying he's pulling out of Syria to the next point where basically he's addressing the camera. And everybody who watched that address from President Trump had to see that they had to see that his personality was not like him. The color of his face, it was almost like what I call the Red Dead look. I mean, it was almost an orangish color, and there was no spontaneity. It was a presented brief. So here's the deal. The military-industrial complex wants this war. The Deagle report that is, estimating that America's population goes down almost by 75 to 80% within the next 7 years, 2025. I think that now it all fits into play. And I do believe that here's, I think, something that people need to get out of. They need to get out of the mindset of us versus them, because when Jesus said the whole world lies in the evil one, he wasn't talking about, quote, the West, the East, the North, or the South. Satan is the little g god of this world, and he's been controlling the puppet strings from behind the scenes until the day where he comes on the scene in the presence of the Antichrist. And I think that, now people don't have to believe, I would pray they would turn to the Lord Jesus Christ, but even those who choose not to believe at this point, the only people that are telling him how this is going to play out are those who are historically based on the Word of God, the Bible, and talking about the spiritual warfare. Because, listen, I made the statement on your show years ago, there is no political solution to a spiritual problem. There is no solution in politics. And unfortunately, and I've said this even when I did back Donald Trump, I want to make this clear because I believed he was God's prosecuting attorney to polarize the country and that everybody's sin would be revealed. And remember, Dave, and I want to make this clear, I would ask people to go on my alerts, the Q alerts on stevequayle.com, and see when I posted it. I posted the warning that God has stated to me years ago. Now, this was before North Korea, Russia, and China were talking about going to nuclear war with us, and before we were, directly poking Russia in the eye. And we've now watched, if you will, the globalist plan for the Middle East go into play as Wesley Clark detailed it out, 7 years ago or however many years ago, maybe longer than that now. But the issue is that after, obviously, Syria, next comes Iran, and Iran made the statement today, as you know, that they're going to give their official response to Trump in the next week or so. So I think that the peril that people are under right now is beyond most people's ability to grasp. So what they will do, the mindset will be deny, deny, deny until the day they die.
I'm afraid you're right, Steve. In fact, you were very clear when you came on this show when Trump was still a candidate, and you said he will be God's prosecuting attorney. All will be revealed in the end.
Well, I think that the one thing that I disagree with a lot of, and I'm sorry, but I do find my odds at the people that are saying that Trump's going to set up a new kingdom on earth and things are going to turn around and be better. Listen, I have no bones to pick with anybody. Let the vultures pick the bones, okay? But the thing that I want to say is this. It is my calling to have done what I've done, to warn as I've warned. And, Dave, it's tough, when people don't understand. This is about them. This is not about us. This is not about us staying on the radio and putting our families in harm's way, dealing with all of the threats and the scorn, the ridicule. By the way, somebody notified me, there are a bunch of people now who claim to be Christians sitting out there and calling God's curses down. Well, I would refer to those people and warn you that the Bible says the curse causeless shall not light. Now, I don't believe they're Christians, but, I've specifically prayed that those who would seek to silence the voice of those trying to warn, that their curses upon us would be returned to them sevenfold. And I make no bones about that. May they have their Ananias and Sapphira moments. And if everybody wants to know what that means, go to the book of Acts. Now, I want to read this, Dave, and then I'll turn it right over to you, and you can talk about it. I said, this is what I posted in my alert. Concerning President Trump's flip-flopping on Russia and his blackmailed, double-mindedness on Syria. A reminder, brethren, I stand by what the Lord told me 5 years ago. Before he allows Russia and China to destroy America in a nuclear war, he would reveal the sins of the American leaders to the people and the people's sins before a holy God. This was long before the nuclear standoff with North Korea, Russia, and or China was in play. I suggest President Trump is not exempt from the sins of the leaders being exposed. The Bible teaches that wicked kings bring judgment upon wicked nations. It's the Luciferians initiating their false WWIII scenario to come to pass, to be followed by the arrival of the Antichrist. Remember the sudden destruction that Paul spoke about? Sudden means unexpectedly and instantly. And then I quoted Daniel 4:17, Dave, and this is really a powerful statement. This is by the decree of the watchers and the demand by the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth the kingdoms of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will. He setteth over it the basis of men. And I said, we all had better be taking every word, including this one, the one I just read, in serious prayer before the Lord. And I tell people, look beyond the obvious. There is no political solution to a spiritual problem. It's called sin and rebellion against the living God. We had rah-rah, we had nationalism, we had hope, we had a dream for a better future, but we missed the R word. And repentance. And, somebody sent me an email saying, I don't have to repent of anything. And the guy claimed to be a believer. Well, the bottom line, Jesus said, if you say you have no sin, your sin remains. So the thing that's critical, I think, for everyone to understand, number one, This is the globalist push for WWIII, World War III. They must have a World War III, not the Battle of Armageddon yet, World War III, in order to bring on the man of peace who brings peace to pretty much a destroyed America, Western Europe. Now, I think it's important to understand the reason why there wasn't immediate Russian retaliation is because President Putin is waiting and measuring his response. I believe it is absolutely a psychological warfare to get the whole world to hate the United States. And as you know, Dave, the prophet Jeremiah said to the nation of Israel when they became totally rebellious and wicked beyond description that God would make the nation of Israel a hissing in the nostrils of those around in the countries of those surrounding Jerusalem. Now, we are becoming a hissing, and so when you're being hissed at, and by the way, that word does exist in the Old Testament, and it's interesting, it's what snakes do, as you know. The point being is that the world's ready to strike, and I want to tell people that the vision that Henry Gruver had and that Dmitry Duduman had of Russia attacking the United States, our nuclear warehouse storehouses, I want to inform everybody and just remind them of one thing, that you will even see, you can quote me on this and you can argue with it, but even though France has sided with the United States now, when the war gets hot, you'll watch Germany, West Germany, and France turn against the United States. And that is in Dmitry Duduman's vision of, I think, 18 years ago now. So here's where we're at. We're where the prophetic is meeting the reality and the headlines of the day. There is no way to put into context world events outside of, in my perspective, a biblical event. Now, there are people that jumping up and down at, the Burning Man Festival. And for the record, everybody, when the captains of industry and of, good night, Hollywood and everybody go to the Burning Man has always been Satan. It even goes back to the Druid worship of the Wicker Man. But beyond that, it goes even to the, I forget which one of the bands was, and I don't want anybody to go look it up, but, I am the God of hellfire, the lyrics were, and I bring you fire, and it was a rock tune, and I don't know who that is, I could care less, but why it's important now is given the choice between life and death, the Shadow Masters will present such a wonderful picture of death, meaning you are now God through transhumanism, through all of the genetic alterations, through artificial intelligence. Man will become God, and you can choose your own hell or your own heaven. Oldest lie in the book is now the greatest promise for the future.
Well, it's very humanist. It's a humanist point of view. It's not Christian.
Well, no, but even beyond humanist, Dave, it's a Satanist point of view, because that's what Satan said to Eve, ye shall not die. Ye shall not die. So we're at the point where now mankind is trying to escape eternal death. They believe that by potentially downloading their subconscious into new and greater versions of the old them, they believe that converging and merging with robotics and ultimately giving way to a, if you will, virtual other world existence where they're avatars and nothing is kept from them. Even when God scrambled the languages at the Tower of Babel, he made the statement, let us go down and scramble their languages, because at that point they had purpose in their heart, and everything they had purpose they would do. The question is where will God scramble? And I coined a term, Dave, I call it technolon. Not Teflon, but technolon, Technylon, and that's just technological Babylon. Because as Babylon sought a universal language, a universal religion, a universal one world, that's where we're at now. Just as God scrambled it then on the plains of Shinar, now we see, if you will, a technological version of Babylon rising, and Mystery Babylon, which has been hid in the shadows of ancient history, is now prominently featured in the headlines of contemporary history. So the thing is that we're seeing a full-scale press for global domination by the Luciferians, and that's the only reason why in 1950 Warburg could make that statement. And, 1950, we're talking 68 years ago, and he said, by consent or by conquest, there will be a new world order. And George Bush's points of light, those are Luciferian light. And by the way, it'll be interesting to see if Barbara Bush passes away. They're already running headlines of her death, and she's gone home for hospice care. I think she's, 92 years old. But it'll be interesting to see the timing of their mutual passing. Now, I'm not wishing that on any of them. They will reap what they've sown. Just like David Rockefeller in all of his statements about a one-world government, I guess he's realizing now that it may have been a big mistake for him to buy into the lie. And it's the same thing for Madame Rothschild and those who go into eternity without Jesus Christ. So here's the thing. They're getting ready to pull the plug on all nation sovereignty, and the best way to do it is with World War III, and the man of peace comes on the scene. The question is, will India and Pakistan go at it during that time period? How close is Israel ready to launch on Iran, or Iran ready to launch on Israel? As they said, Tel Aviv and Haifa will basically be vaporized. How soon will Russia launch on Turkey, even though they seem to be allies? The Bosphorus, obviously, where the Russian ships are passing through even today, on their way to the port of Tartus, the control of the Bosphorus will absolutely give Russia total control on their western shores of the Black Sea and everything else. So if they control that, they control everything. So I said years ago, Dave, and I think this is an accurate statement, we're going to watch double crosses, triple crosses, and quadruple crosses between nations, between presidents, between kings. And isn't it fascinating that the UN, I can't say it like I'd like to, but the filth-laden vermin that they are given the determining factor of what is peaceful and what is not, and how they should have the last word. And I believe that right now you are seeing in this country a president who has been co-opted by the power brokers beyond most people's recognition of their names. And it goes beyond the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and the typical, people that want to go rehash 25-year-old information that are just finally getting it. They got to be, if you will, they've got to come into the context of today at light speed.
Well, you're absolutely right. In fact, I want to mention something about double crosses. You brought that up, and I've made this point in a broadcast. I said, of the nations who attacked Syria, it's interesting that Germany wasn't one of them. And I wrote an article that very week before, and I said I looked for Germany to one day leave NATO because Russia holds natural oil over their head, and Germany has much more in common with Russia economically than they do with the United States.
Well, also, look who Angela Merkel is. Whether, it's true that she's a relative of Hitler, it is true that she had Stasi connections. There are even, stories about her being the head of the Stasi, East German secret police, until they merged. And the point that I think people have got to understand this, I know a guy, and this is a true story firsthand, that was in Rome. He sat with a man who was an Italian billionaire, and the guy showed him a picture, and on his phone was a picture of Angela Merkel with the head of the KGB. And that was years ago. But for the record, I believe that Germany is already preempted. Now, here's the thing that's interesting. There's a lot of argument over the history of Albert Pike's World War III and Mazzini's letter. But whether it was really written, Albert Pike's Three World Wars, somebody's following that blueprint to a T. And Pike, in Morals and Dogma, made the statement, the God they worship is Lucifer. So the defense comes in, and they try and claim, well, Lucifer isn't Satan. Lucifer's a light bringer. But the point is, Lucifer was his name before the fall, and after the fall and the rebellion of he and a third of his angels, his name became Satan, the adversary. So what is becoming more and more evident, that we're now watching, if you will, ancient kingdoms springing back to life, and the war that was never truly won and victory now emerges 2,000, 3,000 years later. And we're all in this thing, and it's going to get problematic. You were talking about food. The drought index for the western United States is just absolutely horrid. The late winter that just is hitting the Midwest into the Michigan, into the, all the states along the Great Lakes and down going into the East Coast. If you look at all the volcanoes going off, I'm not trying to, go ADD on you, but I'm just trying to say volcanic ash in the upper atmosphere has a cooling effect. With weather war geoengineering patented devices, they can control the jet stream. So in essence, you can provide a freeze where someplace should be hot, and you can bring heat to where someplace should be cold. All this is going to affect the availability of water and food. And Dave, I think I've said this on your show before. My very first radio program on KHNC, not KHNC in Johnstown, Colorado, is, I think the very first thing I said, and this is something I believe the Lord showed me, he said, Steve, the day will come. And people say, well, I don't believe God talks to you. Well, then check it out in the headlines. The day will come when fresh potable water and food, edible food, will be more precious than silver and gold. Does that mean you don't need silver and gold? No, because when you got silver and gold, the Swiss have a wonderful statement. Look at how long they've lived without war. He who has gold never starves. Someone said, you can't eat gold. I said, that statement is historically untrue. You look at it that you just have to take a bite of gold and somehow it's the same as a T-bone steak. But for the record, every nation, whether it was Pol Pot's Cambodia, whether it was Vietnam, whether it was the Eastern Bloc nations falling after World War II to Soviet communism, whether it was China even, the people that made it out to Formosa, all the people that had something to barter or trade made it out alive. And, fascinating. I've told a story. I think this is really important because we get a lot of skeptics. You guys are all just trying to sell fear to sell gold. Not you, me. Or you're trying to sell fear to sell food. Oh, yeah? How would you like to be in the panic? How long do you think, ladies and gentlemen, it will take for the food shelves to go bare? Dave, I've heard people say 3 days, 3 hours. Well, I have a surprise for them. All food sources, all food depositories have already been cataloged by FEMA. The very first thing under a state of a national emergency that will be basically shut off and shut down to people are airports, gas stations and grocery stores, food warehouses, restaurants, everything, hospital, commissaries, you name it. Any place food is fed to groups and that is stored, for instance, meat lockers, all those places have already been known. So somebody says, well, I'll have 3 days. You better be on the, how should I say that, the receiving end of prayerful consideration what we're talking about tonight, Dave, because, again, it's not just that it's availability. Food is always available. It's the price you have to pay, or in some cases, the price that people had to pay. There's a book on Stalingrad that Bob Griswold gave me, and I read it, and the horrific things that people did, women and kids having to sell themselves to eat. I literally weep when I read that. And then years ago, did you ever read Brother Bob's Vision?
No, I haven't seen that.
Okay. I'll send it to you after the show. It's the only vision I would not post on my website initially for 1 year, and I wouldn't basically send it out, or forgive me, I wouldn't post it. I'd send it out only, the people that really want to know, but I said this, you better have a strong stomach, and you better have a strong walk with the Lord, or else I won't share it with you, okay? And I don't mean you, Dave, but I'm going to share it with you. But I think that the attitude that most people possess right now, Dave, and listening to you and I, or the voluminous amount of information, never have the people of a country been so presented with so much fact, not fake news. It's funny, they call me fake news, and I link to probably 90% of mainstream stories just from all over the world, and from Asia Times, the London Daily Mail, and I should say slash, margin, they've got a fixation with women's anatomy. So whenever I want to say this to all your listeners, Daily Mail, it means warning on the sidebar, and some people know how to blow their screens up so they can avoid that. But isn't it interesting how the Daily Mail, I'm going to digress a minute, has the best coverage almost instantly of events happening? How can, how can that be unless they're tipped off ahead of time? There is no other way. Look, I'm a photographer, a cinematographer, but I still got to get places, and they must have, some of the best intel in the world to be able to have the coverage they have. So here's what I'm saying. I'm saying that food and water are critical. The greatest migration in this country from point A to point B will be when the great earthquakes that come, whether it's in the New Madrid, whether it's on the West Coast, East Coast, wherever they are happening, they will disturb the underground aquifers. That means wells will run dry. That means there will be water in places where there's never water. We're already seeing that. We're seeing rivers and lakes drying up, and then we're seeing rivers flowing almost overnight, new ones popping up. So, as we experience if you will, the words of Isaiah, where God says that the earth is going to stagger like a drunkard, I mean, that's what's happening right now on the planet. And we can talk about pole shift. We can talk about, all the different laws of physics as they relate to planetary orbits that may make some flat earthers unhappy, but there are laws called Bode's law and Roche's limit that are physical, if you will, mathematical formulas. So, without getting into that whole ball of snakes, the point being is that we're now seeing different effects on this planet than have been experienced in modern days. But, one of the reasons I write about ancient catastrophism and, planetary upheaval and gravitational interference, one planet with a greater gravitational field destroying a planet with a lesser, Roche's limit, is the fact that the ancients knew it. Even people who talk about Atlantis, whether you're dealing with the ancient alien people or the write your own history people, the point is that they do not recognize the fact that even the Egyptian priesthood, I'm not talking about the Egyptian Brotherhood now, that goes way back beyond what we would call recorded history, talks about the catastrophic judgments that in the polytheistic world they claim that the gods brought. In our world, we know that God is not pleased with sin. And so, again, the judgment in the universe, whether it's the meteor belt, the asteroid belt, whether it's the different craters on Mars, craters on the moon. And by the way, on Mars, I think you know this, I spend a lot of time arguing with people that Yellowstone's going to blow, Yellowstone's going to blow, Yellowstone's going to blow. Well, I got to tell you something. Even today on the Daily Mail, I just posted on my website, that they present pictures of Mars, and they show it in the context of new craters, trying to decide if they were by asteroid strike or if they're volcanic. And then they liken it to Yellowstone National Park. The reason that's significant, ladies and gentlemen, is because new life forms are going to be identified, and then they're going to claim that the Martian origin of life in the Antarctic and even in Yellowstone, that there's a connection between the two. Whether you're dealing with Mars or Enceladus, you're going to be hearing this. And, Dave, when you tell people ahead of time why that's important, they're too concerned, and maybe rightly so, that how does that affect them? Well, it may not affect you if you're dead, but if you have children and grandchildren that are not being trained up in the fear and admonition of the living God, they're already going to be sucked in by the octopus. They're already in the tentacle-like clutches of the, if you will, the ultimate fight for planet Earth. So we're at a point now where, look, you get information, whether it's from John or Paul, you get all the different people that talk to you. I get the different people that talk to me. Alex has been on his show talking to people, and there are a lot of people that want to do something, but right now they don't know what to do. The first thing I tell people is this: check it out. Ask God to reveal himself to you. And look, we're beyond the, don't talk about God, Quayle. He has nothing to do with this. Oh, yes, he does. He has everything to do with it. And no matter how tough the toughest guy is, no matter how many different forms of fighting, combat style, karate, judo, doesn't matter, martial arts, doesn't matter if he's the best shot in the world, a microscopic the smallest, if you will, virus can take the strongest, toughest guy down. And now we're seeing that, in my opinion, the intentional release of genetically altered bacteria and viruses released all over the earth, and the reason all those dead scientists and now dead naturopaths is that they do not want anyone to be able to figure out and trace it back to who developed it so it can be, quote, just a freak of nature. It's not a freak of nature, ladies and gentlemen. It is the global depopulation underway. We're not, quote, as they say in the South, fixing to get there. We are there, Dave, and people had better just have a sobriety test. When I say a sobriety test, I mean in maybe a reality test. Get sober, you know, as the scripture says, shake yourself, wake up.
Well, I think that people need to decide where they stand on this morally. Steve, I want to go down that route too. I think the moral part of it's real important. But you said something that really caught my attention, and I had an aha moment. 7 going on 8 years ago, when the Gulf oil spill happened, and I started a subsequent follow-ups, and I wrote a 7-part series. What I discovered from researchers whose voices were being squelched at universities like Tulane and Dr. Wilma Subra, they were saying that the oil was still going, this is years after the fact, and was infiltrating the water table, and they expected geological changes as a result of this infiltration over a period of years. Are you aware of that?
Well, I wasn't aware of that specific subject, but we know this. We're seeing things happening in the Gulf from the dead zone, but we also know this, that oil stays in specific areas, and strata. So as you pump the water out and the oil gets in, then you get a lot of plate slippage, you know. You either get a subduction quake or an overthrust quake, and now we're seeing that happening. We're seeing that happening in, where was it, Nebraska the other day that had 4 earthquakes?
Yes.
Right in a row. We're seeing it obviously in the New Madrid area, Oklahoma. We're seeing it in Texas. But what's really important, Dave, is to understand this, that no matter how sophisticated our technology is, unplug it and see what happens. Also, I want to remind everybody that the word zombie is applied by the New World Order people to those who will be forced to live above ground and deal with all of the different issues of fallout, famine, gangs, hordes, and that's where the term zombie came, not just from Rob Zombie and the zombie movies and Frankenstein, etc. Mary Shelley, by the way, when she wrote that book, Frankenstein, that was during the year they had no summer, because of Mount Tambora going off. So the problem is that, I'm sorry, Mount Tambora, it was Krakatoa. So the thing that's, and even tonight, there's a rumbling in Krakatoa. Krakatoa now has a interesting smaller volcano called Anak, A-N-A-K, Krakatoa. Well, Anak, an interesting word, is that refers to the giants, the Anakim. So it's fascinating that, ancient tradition, especially South Pacific mythology, talks about the, not only the giants, but little creatures being surrounded by volcanoes. And lo and behold, I get emails from people that live in, good night, Ecuador, and talking about all the weird stuff they're seeing down there. So I think it's important that people understand that this stuff is related. We know, and whether you want to believe it or not, the Bible, God spoke the worlds into existence and said, let there be light. So sound precedes light. Sound has an effect on matter. Whether you remember the old BASF tape commercials where they would play specific frequencies because BASF tape was so concise that you could break glass with it. Well, if you take that to a subatomic level and subatomic harmonics and frequencies, then you can basically change the nature of matter, and you can change gravity. I know that sounds weird, but harmonic levitation, which the ancients were very much adept at, is a real thing. You pound a table, obviously the vibration of the glass, whatever type of glass or wood, in my case, my desk, the point is that moves stuff. Well, we're seeing now all of the powers of heaven being shaken. And that's why the Bible goes on and say signs and wonders, the sun, moon, and stars, and men's hearts failing them for fear of looking after those things coming up on the earth. That doesn't mean Upper Peninsula, Michigan. It means up on the earth. So, we've got to cover a lot of ground tonight, and because it all relates. You know what I'm saying? You don't just have one finger. If you do, you've lost a lot of the use of your hand, but you have 5 fingers. You've got 10 fingers. Everything is, it seems like, in motion, and things are going to change so drastically. The question is, when will President Putin act, not react? He didn't react. He's acting. All of the equipment going to the Middle East, and look, it is a hook in the jaw. It's Ezekiel 38. There are people that will argue, well, Ezekiel 38, the battle of Ezekiel, Gog Magog doesn't happen until after the tribulation. Not true. There's a dual fulfillment. Go ahead.
You're absolutely right about the Gog Magog. I've written about that before. There's so many different directions we can go with this. Let's go back to the base root. Trump is clearly being controlled. Now, is it an outright coup? Is it the satanic ritual that you're talking about? Can Trump undo this? Is there enough Christian power around him to overturn the mind control that you think he's experiencing?
Well, the answer to that is, with God, all things are possible. But I think that it's going to take the R word, the repentance, to break the hold. See, the devil can always hold on to anger. He can hold on to man's folly, but he can't do anything in response to God's intervening on behalf of a nation that repents. Yet, Dave, during everything, it was rah-rah and not enough of, oh no, forgive me, Lord. My answer at this point is no. Someone says, where's your faith? Well, my faith has been on the radio for 25 years and all the different books I've written, trying to get people to understand the times we now live in. And that's why it's so critical that people understand transhumanism and the hybrid age. This is exactly what Satan did in the Garden of Eden and then forward by releasing fallen angels. And angels, I want to make this clear. Some guy took me to task, and I don't mind when people want to discuss something, but when they say, you need to watch this YouTube video, you're wrong. I sent an email and said, listen, I know what I'm talking about. Here, this is critical. The Bible says that the things we see are formed from the things we don't see. And in other words, again, the idea is simply this, that the invisible determines the visible until the invisible chooses to manifest, meaning God manifesting himself in the person of Jesus Christ. That's why Jesus could say, if you see me, you've seen the Father. Well, that sure made religious people flip out, and the Pharisees had a pity party and just absolutely congratulated themselves on, thank God they're not like that Nazarene. Well, God forbid they should have been like them. Maybe they wouldn't have spent eternity in hell. But the point is that we're looking, I think, like this. We're pushing on a string as it relates to Donald Trump. Specifically, your question, can Trump break free of it? Not in his own power and not given the fact that he didn't drain the swamp. He has, who was it, Dave? I think you mentioned it, but he still has, Rand Paul mentioned it, that God bless Rand Paul. Rand Paul said, look, you can't be a president of the United States and have everybody who hates your guts still working for you, and then those with top secret clearance using their access to files and information to undo you. The greatest, if you will, piracy of the truth happened by changing the narrative and allowing, here's what they did. They knew, all of them knew, of the complicity of the Democrats and Republicans in selling the Russians our uranium, okay? That's a fact. You've written about it. There have been stories on it, eyewitnesses, evidence, emails, you name it. But there was no follow-up or follow-through because the people who were investigating it, from the AG to the head of the different bureaus and intelligence agencies, were all basically thinking Hillary Clinton's going to get in. So they immediately stole the narrative and tried to change that narrative to make it Donald Trump's cavorting with the Russians to change the outcome of the election. Well, and then we come to find out that how many million votes were cast illegally, fake, The mainstream media doesn't even respond to that. And I think this is something that people have got to understand. The mainstream media to truth is what arsenic is to the living body. It's a killer. You control the narrative, Dave. You know this, and they control the outcome. What has Trump been doing? He's been fighting for his life. Look at all the horrible things they've said about his wife, his son, and I believe that Donald Trump wants to do the economic right thing. I believe he has, how do I say this? He has desire, but ability has to be in place to carry out that desire. We're told that he's, pro-Second Amendment, and I'll tell you this. If he allows the person, well, I forget her name, you probably know, for the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals to go in, one of the most rabid anti-gun judges in existence, then you can kiss off, I can kiss off the Second Amendment unless we're willing to take it to the next level. And I pray that day never comes. Do I think that day is coming? Yes. But I pray it never comes. And I think you know what I'm talking about. He also said,
exactly.
He also said, didn't he, about the NRA? Well, why are you afraid of them? In essence, it seems like listen, a double-minded man. And the double-mindedness, God bless him, I don't believe he knows. I want to get to this, too. Ladies and gentlemen, look up Kabbalah, K-A-B-A-L-L-A-H. Obviously, if Madonna's in it and so many powerful entertainment figures and those who have even given themselves over, why would someone have a son-in-law and a daughter being involved in that? Well, number one, he isn't a spiritual man. Nobody ever said that God sets up the righteous of men over nations. The Bible, Daniel 4:17, says he setteth up the basis. If you say someone's base, that means pretty much immoral, doesn't it?
Well, it speaks for itself. It's on its face. But you have to understand, he came into the office as a conflicted man. He was a baby Christian in transition, and he didn't have the strength to fight off what he was against. That's how I see it.
I think, can I say this? I think that, Lord help me, please. I'm serious, Lord, you got to help me. How is it that people deny God's offer of salvation and deliverance, yet want to embrace men to bring them and to do for them when only God can do for them? I mean, here's the thing. God, and he's God. In that Daniel 4:17, basically, he's the one that rules the affairs of men. But what drives us mortals crazy, unless God reveals it to us, God says, my ways are not your ways. For as high as the heaven is above the earth, so are my ways above your ways. So, like I said, Dave, a lot of people go, God, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? It'd be better if you did this. I tell people, God's suggestion box is always empty. In other words, he is not us. We are not him. We come into his family through Jesus by applying the blood of the Lamb. Look at the war that's been on Jesus. And quite candidly, the Christians, and I say this, I have two words. I think you've heard me say this on your show. There's claimants of Christianity who aren't, and there's possessants of eternal life. Not possessed, but possessants. It is absolutely critical that people understand that God himself is drawing a division. There's so much fighting in the body, or that which claims to be the body, the Catholic Church will go into a full-scale civil war. Dave, I am not anti-Catholic with that statement. I said it 25 years ago, so I'm not responding to this contemporary entity in Rome, okay? I'm saying that you're going to see it happen in the evangelical world. You're going to see it happen in local churches, and God will call his people out, that he is leading to wherever he's going to lead them. Because in essence, and I've said this before, I believe, you know me, I'm not a pacifist, okay? If I had my way, every woman would have a concealed weapon permit and be as good as Annie Oakley or better. If I had my way, and I mean that, because I'm tired of watching, these monsters that are turned loose having their way with the innocent. Same thing with kids. Look at the kids of our generation, and I'll call it the evangelical generation. The majority are abandoned. The majority have been schooled by what I call rotten to the core curriculum. The majority are being persuaded by the globalist mindset. It's like an octopus with not 8 tentacles, but an infinite amount of tentacles, and unfortunately it all goes back to the rebellious one, Satan, the adversary, and he's real, and here's the thing that I just got to get off my chest, okay? He's more real to his followers than Jesus is to those who claim him or at least acknowledge him. And that's not everybody. Now, let me make this clear. I'm talking about the majority of what the people would call, evangelicals, the people that live on television ministries and stuff, but they have no real contact with the world. They escape. And so, you know, I love it when somebody says, I like you and Hodges, Quayle. You guys drive me crazy, but at least you're cheap entertainment. Well, we may be cheap entertainment, but as your lazy boy, it was not a Freudian slip. I meant to say that. Yeah, is disrupted when things don't go your way. And Dave, you know what? I didn't see any real reaction. Maybe you did. We'll hit it in the next hour. Did you see any real concern that this might be World War III time?
Well, it depends on your timeline. On April 2nd, I hoped that he was going to meet with Putin. He's pulling the troops out. And by April 5th, and also what was going on the southern border, I knew it wasn't going to go that way. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been joined here in the first hour by Steve Quayle, and I feel like we're just getting warmed up. We're going to come back and revisit a lot of the